The Marlins have a new president of baseball ops. Peter Bendix is in the house for the Marlins. They go and get the guy from the Rays. He's younger than me, but he's more talented. I think this is a perfect hire for the Marlins. Equally, we are breaking news as we go here. Berti is definitely a Marlin for 2024, and we are awaiting news on Jorge Soler and whether the Marlins look to extend a qualifying offer. Tons to get into on this evening's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up, of course, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Miami Marlins _UK. Make sure you hit subscribe on the pod. It's available everywhere. It's your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen. There is a YouTube channel, of course, that is also called Locked On Marlins. Make sure you head on over there. Join the comments in particular. It is a zoo, straight up zoo in the comments, no doubt, but a good zoo, a friendly zoo, kind of. Guys, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel and make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And I'm delighted to welcome back on Monday, the 6th of November. The UK GOAT is back. Sean Barrett, how are we doing, brother?
I'm doing well, Peter. A week away, not talking baseball with you. I'm glad to be back. These are kind of my favorite episodes as well, as we're both half an eye on the podcast, half an eye on Twitter, keeping an eye on what's going on. News is starting to drop and it's starting to drip in now, isn't it? The offseason is starting to begin and we're starting to see how the team and the organization are going to fill out for the new season. So, exciting times. Yeah,
no doubt, mate. These are the best ones. These are our best episodes, I'd say, where like anything could happen, anything could drop at any moment. I'm thinking back of trade deadline, mate, where we're doing a pod waiting for news. We end the pod. Then we have to start another pod because more news drops like after the time. And actually, the offseason has definitely started. It's not specific to the Marlins, but like today, you're starting to get some activity. And the main activity has been the manager merry-go-round, which kind of dropped. All of a sudden, you get this news around Craig Counsell. Where's he going to go? Is he staying with the Brewers? Is he going to the Mets? Neither. Craig Counsell ends up going over to the Cubs. Cubs sacked there, dude. At one point, Marlins Twitter's thinking, hold on a minute. Craig Counsell, ex-Marlin. Could there be a connection here? Skip Schumaker, maybe he's unhappy with the situation. Is he going somewhere? We're all putting two and two together, getting 97. In the end, Craig Counsell goes to the Cubs. But, it was a bit of a wild kickoff to the offseason, really, right? This kind of manager merry-go-round. And, this offseason, I think, has the potential to be a real juicy one, particularly with Ohtani in the mix as well, right?
Yeah, we haven't even talked to Ohtani yet.
No, we haven't.
And yet we're all getting excited. The Counsell news breaking that he was going to go to a team that already had a manager in place. Automatically, that opens up the whole of the league. But obviously, as Marlins fans, we're focused on that. And Counsell obviously having those history and those memories with him. If you've not read The Chicken Run at Midnight, I highly recommend that book. Talking about the World Series that year. So ultimately he's gone to Chicago for a bag and a half, hell of a lot of money. You can't blame him really, but this is definitely starting to warm up. That hot stove, as it's called, is usually reserved for trade and free agency, but it's starting to get hotter now.
Yeah, absolutely. We're sitting here waiting for the news on some qualifying offer stuff. We've just seen the Phillies. They've extended a qualifying offer to Aaron Nola. That makes sense. They haven't extended a qualifying offer to Rhys Hoskins. To be honest with you, at one point, I was looking at Hoskins and thinking, we may need him. But obviously the Josh Bell news kind of means that that's no longer necessary, probably. So there's all things kind of dropping in and happening almost in real time here. But this offseason is going to be wild. And from a Marlins perspective, mate, we've got our offseason started already with the hire that was talked about. Bruce Sherman obviously had this in the works for some time. Shared this strategic view with Kim. Kim wasn't on board, but that president of baseball ops has been appointed, and Peter Bendix is the guy. And when me and you spoke about this type of hire, what stood out to me, Sean, there was a couple of points that you made, and I need to go back and clip the episode actually, mate. But you were talking about we need a sabermetric-driven guy. We need someone that is from that background, someone that's young, someone that's been there and done it. And really, I think the Marlins have absolutely nailed that profile and that wish list from your perspective, mate. So your reaction on Peter Bendix as the new president of baseball ops for the Marlins?
Yeah, I'll start this by talking about Kim. Obviously, I was a big proponent for her and the job that she did with the Marlins. So the fact that I have to move on from that was a bit of a shame. But when I gave that brief of what I would hope that they would bring in, yeah, Peter Bendix fills that whole catalogue, doesn't it?
It does.
He's been there, done that. And one of the things I really like is the fact that he started at Tampa as an intern.
Mm-hmm.
And he's worked his way all the way through. So he knows all of those roles inside and out, and has worked his way up to such a high role. And to me, hiring him was almost similar in the vein of how the Marlins hired Skip.
Mm-hmm.
They took the best second guy that they could find and say, we'll give you the number one job. And that's what they've got given to Peter Bendix. You can say that the president of baseball operations is 1A, 1B with a GM, but is it though? Because in hiring Peter Bendix, they've basically said to him, you're currently a GM, previously been an assistant president of baseball operations, we'll give you the number one job. So that's why he's come over. And that's how you do it, isn't it? If you've got to get a guy and you know that you're not going to be able to get one of the top number one guys, you get the best second guy. And in my eyes, whenever you can get a guy from Tampa Bay, you do that, because they've shown consistently for decades a way to win, to be competitive with a low budget. Does that not sound perfect for the Marlins? They have been for the last 20 years, as long as I've been a fan, they've been behind the 8 ball on that sabermetrics avenue. They just never picked it up. They've always been behind. They're decades behind. And they're not going to build that in one day.
No.
But bringing in a guy that's shown the ability to do it at every level and worked his way through it, they really are getting themselves a huge boost to move into the future of what the Marlins might look like.
Absolutely. Everything you said there is just on the money. You know, you have to look at the Rays model and consider how are the Rays. That's the model to recreate. And the way to do that is to go and get guys that know that inside out. And that's the point you're making there with Bendix, is the fact that he's been there for so long and has played at every role. And for me, that's the perfect guy. Interesting, though, it was talked about Chaim Bloom. They did look to interview Chaim Bloom as part of this. He declined that. He's declining everyone. It sounds like he's going to take a year off and maybe do some kind of consultancy stuff and just maybe have some family time along the way. Fair enough. But the impression I got was that Peter Bendix was actually still the guy, was their number one target, was the sense I had. And that was, Bruce had identified Peter Bendix, was thinking this could be the right type of guy for us. You're doing your due deal, looking at other opportunities. I mean, Chaim Bloom from the same, Rays tree in many ways, obviously gone on to the Red Sox. The Red Sox have a very different budget situation than the Marlins. And so for me, I look at Bendix and think, perfect guy. But what was your read on that with Chaim Bloom? I mean, the Marlins extended that offer to him to interview. He declined it. It is what it is. He's declining everyone. But do you think Bendix was always the guy?
It's hard to say, isn't it? When Kim first left to the Marlins, we spoke about it and talked about the idea that I thought that Bruce must have in his mind that guy already. You don't go to your current number one in the business and say, I'm putting someone ahead of you, but I don't know who it is yet. That would be weird for me. So that was a bit strange that we've taken a couple of weeks to get here. Chaim Bloom is, as you said, he would have been another good candidate in the sense that, he's been to the top of the Rays and is available now because he went to the Red Sox and I don't want to say failed, but obviously didn't do well enough to keep his job there. But that doesn't mean that, he's damaged goods in any way. Ultimately, it was clear that Bruce had one organization in mind as far as who he wants to cherry pick somebody from. So whether it was Chaim Bloom or whether it was Peter Bendix, I think they would presumably been the number one, number two options in his mind, because he's clearly taken the Rays model and gone, yeah, that's probably best for us, which is 100% right.
For sure. Going to carry on this conversation and consider what the strategic change will be here with Bendix coming in, what he's going to look to maybe rejuvenate this Marlins organization. Equally, what it could mean for some of the guys on the active roster through this year. I'm really intrigued about that as well. Before we do that, it's time to let you know about our good friends over at FanDuel. And you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, guys, you're back here with me, Peter Pratt, and the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett, on Monday, the 6th of November. The Marlins have a new president of baseball ops just in time. There were some decisions to be made, but Peter Bendix is in as president of baseball ops for the Marlins, effectively replacing Mike Hill. I guess is in some ways that role has been vacant. I guess in some ways Derek Jeter kind of filled that role. And that segues me into it. What I was thinking about this morning, and in reflection, I was sitting there with my morning coffee and, getting my head together in this. And Derek Jeter spoke when he joined the Marlins. He spoke about this layers and layers of talent. And when I heard some of the stuff that Peter Bendix was talking about when he was at the Rays, they have very much a similar philosophy in that. It's about having that next man up mentality. I think those are the words he used in an interview I saw, Peter Bendix. And so I think Derek Jeter had the right strategy, to be honest with you. It made sense to me. And this is how you run these markets. They don't have the free agent budgets. You have to draft and develop and have those layers of talent. Jeter was right, Sean, in my opinion. Unfortunately, the guys around making the calls, him included, I think we're off the money. Thus, the plan ends up failing. Kim Ang came in and did a really good win now job. Like, you have to say, Kim Ang's win now approach, it worked. Although they didn't end up winning overall. But, you could see Kim flip into that mode and actually was pretty effective in that mode and got the Marlins to where they wanted to be, which is in the dance. They got to the dance, they got bounced. It happens. It happens to anyone. But I think it's going to be really interesting now, right, to see the strategic change now. How this club and this organization is now run, how they go about things. So one of the things that kind of stood out to me was the fact that from a Rays perspective, what we've seen has been these guys into arbitration years, all of a sudden, they become traded. Surprisingly traded, to be honest with you. And that's what kind of dawned on me. I was thinking, man, the Marlins have a big ARB class with some big names in it that have got some big dollars allocated. I'm very intrigued to see how organizationally Peter Bendix looks to add these layers of talent when there isn't much down there at the moment, maybe not enough time to keep drafting year after year. Do wonder what this arbitration cluster looks like. Luzardo, Arias, Jazz Chisholm, Jesus Sanchez, Trevor Rogers, all these guys. Could they be on the block at some point?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think it would be strange for me to see such seismic changes done immediately. I think in my mind, this coming season is a bit of a sort of like a middle ground area, isn't it? We know without Sandy, that being competitive is going to be difficult. So do they make some moves to try and improve, to stretch a window a little bit, or do they just go full rebuild, which is certainly something that's interesting to me. I just want to go back to one of the points you made about the idea of what Derek Jeter said, which is bang on, layers of development, but the small budget, I'm going to say, I'm not going to say small market approach, I'm going to say small budget approach to running a baseball team is you have to be smarter than everybody else. And that's incredibly difficult to do. It's easy just to spend, I say easy, it's easier to spend an awful lot of money like the Texas Rangers did, like many other teams do, and outspend your competition. If you're going to do it with a small budget, you've got to be smart. And unfortunately, Derek Jeter simply wasn't. And that's going to be the challenge to Peter Bendix and the rest of the front office going forwards. Is with the budget that they have, they've got to be smarter, and they've got no room for failure. We see what happened with the Marlins over the last few years with Avisal Garcia signing. When you spend money, you've got to make sure you spend money right. And that includes arbitration. Obviously, there are some guys in arbitration, especially when you get to years sort of 2, 3, even 4. Sometimes if the guy's gone early, like that's a lot of money. You're talking 12 to 16 million. That's almost that is free agency money for the Marlins, isn't it? So it would be interesting to see what some of those larger ticket price players that the Marlins currently have, Jorge Soler, of course, included, what they do with that.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be something to watch anyway. But the other thing that popped into my head around this one is thinking about our good friend Alan Witz, who's the biggest Jesus Sanchez fan going. But we have to remember that the Rays traded Jesus Sanchez away. I don't know if Peter Bendix was, pulling the trigger on that one at any moment, but I think that's going to be fascinating to watch, actually, to see, for someone, maybe they've crossed paths before. You got an arbitration guy there. It's fair to say there's been some holes in Jesus Sanchez's offensive makeup, let's say. Is that the type of guy that, maybe doesn't quite set a Peter Bendix, fully alive at this point? I don't know. I said before, what we thought we knew about this roster and how it's constructed and how it's made up is out the window now because Kim's gone. And actually, it's literally out the window now because this is a completely different philosophy, not just in terms of, organizationally, but it's going to be how they evaluate players, etc. Like it's going to be completely different. And so what we thought we knew, now we don't. What we do know, though, is Skip Schumaker at this point is the manager for 2024. Obviously, a few people were putting a few things together earlier. But Skip was as part of the Marlins presser or the release. Skip Schumaker was in there saying, hey, basically, I'm looking forward to working with Peter Bendix. I mean, what else is he going to say? But I think the Skip Schumaker situation is really interesting. I put something out there earlier that for me, I'd look to lock up Skip longer term. Like the Marlins made a move. They got it right. Other clubs made moves last year and they got it wrong. But the Marlins made the right move for Skip Schumaker. He led them to the postseason. He's an absolute stud of a leader, set the right culture. There's nothing more to see, to be honest with you. For me, it's let's make that move early. Where do you sit on this with Skip Schumaker? I mean, the team do have a club option into 25, so maybe there's no necessity to make the move now. But I do think it would be an interesting statement piece at this moment for Peter Bendix and Skip to truly align, rather than just, there's a team option that was already there. I'd like to see some cohesion here at this point and get some consistency rolling. What about you?
Well, I'm definitely pro Skip, and I personally would like to see it. Whether or not Peter Bendix comes in, it's interesting, isn't it? I'd be surprised personally if there's an extension before the season. I think that the fact that the player option is there, they can sort of kick the can down the road a little bit. I would like to see, a good working relationship between the two of them, because obviously Peter Bendix is going to bring in this sabermetrical sort of organization and to the team, and they're going to run like that. So he's either going to want to bring in somebody that he knows understands that, or he's going to want to mold Skip, who is a perfect guy for this. If I'm Skip, I'm saying, I'm picking everything I can from this guy's mind, because I believe if he truly believes in the sabermetric way of baseball, which hopefully he does, he'll know that's only going to improve him as a manager going forwards. But I'd really like to see the two of them work together and mold out this team in that vein. But whether or not that happens, obviously he's going to come in and he's going to want to bring a lot of his own guys. Whether or not that stretches all the way down to team manager, I'm not sure. I think he should be probably focusing on higher level sort of areas of the team The team still need a GM. The team still need a scouting director. Scouting director is then going to bring in all his own guys in that organization. To me, Skip's the one guy that you kind of want to keep, the guy that's in the clubhouse, the guy that's talking to the players. The players know, like, there's been so much upheaval this offseason. Keeping some sort of semblance of similarity for the players and for the organization is going to be a good thing. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting couple of weeks, months, as the team slowly build out the rest of the front office and see what direction they're going to take with Skip and the rest of the coaches. Because obviously, if they bring in their own manager, he's going to want to bring in his own bench coach and first base coach and third base coaches. There could still be an awful lot of change even after the change we've already had.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that was the interesting thing around the Skip hire was the decision-making around his staff and the way he filled those out. Like, Skip nailed his staff as well. Like, I mean, John Jay, he's probably been lying down for 2 months since. Like, he took a beating, John Jay. But, I mean, his staff ended up, it was, like, nailed on. Brant Brown, John Jay, the rest of the guys, like, you just need to leave that there where it's at, to be honest. There's bigger fish to fry for Peter Bendix at this point. And that starts with those big ticket roles that are unfilled at this point. DJ Svilik gone, and frankly, rightly so. Spoke about it, I think, a few weeks back. Like, that was the right call. He'd had his opportunity. You got a new guy coming in. Obviously, the GM role is vacant, so wait to see where they go in that front. But the Marlins here have a potential to be one of, like, the youngest front offices and management staff in the league, to be honest with you. And I've got no problem with that. Like, this is modern baseball. You have to think differently to others and operate in a different way with this low budget situation. And so I'm all for that. That's what stunned me yesterday when I realized the president of baseball ops for the Marlins is younger than me. That hit home that maybe my career advancement hasn't gone as fast as I would have anticipated. But nevertheless, still a fan of the podcast, but it is what it is. Sean, what do you see being, as we look out to 2024, and there's a lot of unknowns. It's a bit tricky for us at this point, but as we look out, what do you see being the biggest kind of tangible change that we'll see as Marlins fans watching the Marlins in 24? What do you think that could look like, or is it too early to tell?
I think on the field, you'll see some significant changes. I think you'll see more lefty-righty options. The bullpen and the usage of the bullpen and the rotation, I think, will probably be the biggest part. You'll see more. You could see more openers. You could see more sort of long men. You could see 6-man rotations. You could see pretty much anything compared to the norm that we've experienced over the last 20 years. They're going to be I think they're going to be really inventive. I think they're going to really try and break a new mold, hopefully. Like, we've seen some of the league changes to try and curb that and try and curb it and keep it a bit more traditional. But every team, apart from probably the Marlins, over the last couple of years have been trying to find different nooks and crannies of finding value. And I really hope that the Marlins start to be a bit more sort of intuitive with that. And I think this year is a perfect example of, I don't actually think the team are going to be overly competitive. So trying to eke out wins here and there by being a little bit more adventurous, for me, could be quite an exciting proposition.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's what we've seen with the Rays, right? That's kind of been their calling card in the past, since I've been following baseball. It feels like the Rays and their approach, they've pushed the ticket in terms of platoons and pitching and how they approach that. Openers, long men, piggybacking, everything going on. And it's just trying to find the right matchup in the right spot and being creative with that. And I think the way that we look at the pitching, the rotation, maybe some of the gaps there, but equally some of the guys that will be kind of vying for spots, like, it may suit those guys actually, because being more creative with innings will help to, spread the load, so to speak. And I think that's probably the primary concern that we have with no Sandy, is how do you cover these innings? And so I think it's going to be, to your point here, the creativity to cover these innings, because there's still going to be shackles on Yuri Perez, and this is going to be shackles on Max Meyer, let's say, if he ends up back up. There's going to be maybe some limitations on Trevor Rogers if he's still around. All of these guys, there's so many question marks around. I mean, Eddie Cabrera, he's the guy I'm most interested about. I mean, how are they going to solve this Eddie Cabrera riddle, to be honest with you? Maybe they trade him away. That is one option, to be honest with you, and make him someone else's problem. But we'll see. I think it's going to be really intriguing just to see how things adjust, both organizationally, but like on the field, and how quickly that will happen. So that's going to be really interesting. Like, to your point, does Skip buy into it? I'm sure Skip will. And this could be the start of something really beautiful, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I was looking back and people were talking to me on Twitter earlier saying, someone commented about Skip Schumaker saying, listen, I'm not sure I'm fully sold yet. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, look at the run diff, look at the 1-run wins, look at all the luck they had. Like, if it went the other way, what would we be saying about Skip Schumaker at this point? So I do think it's a really interesting point that, what does Skip do in year 2? If all of a sudden their 1-run victories are flipped and the run diff will probably still not be great because the offense won't be, it isn't the Marlins. So, it could be an interesting conversation there around Skip. But for me, I've seen enough generally. But, it's an interesting second year, right? We say that with hitters. We say that with players. Like, you potentially have the sophomore slump, and maybe Skip Schumaker could face into a sophomore slump from a managerial perspective, potentially. I don't know. What do you think?
I think probably that's overvaluing what a manager does.
Could be.
A manager is a glorified guidance counselor. They're
right
there for a player to rest a shoulder on, and it's an emotional thing rather than there's some instructional. Obviously, Skip's a former player and he's been there and done that, but it's about keeping the clubhouse light and about keeping them all pointing in the right direction. I don't think it's too much about X's and O's and wins and losses and run differential. Yep. That's too much of it. At the ultimate point, you're putting 9 players on the baseball field. You're putting them in a position to win, and then you're keeping them with their head up high. That's what a manager's doing ultimately.
Sean, I have some breaking news for you. I expected to break this news on this episode, so we will break it. And the news is it's regarding Roy Soler and qualifying offers. And I don't know if you've seen the news yet, but if you haven't, I'll break it to you. Roy Soler not extended a qualifying offer by the Marlins, as reported by Jeff Passan, Craig Mish with the retweet. Interesting. And only 7 guys received a qualifying offer this year. Shohei Ohtani, no surprise there. Aaron Nola, Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger, Josh Hader, Matt Chapman, and Sonny Gray. Notable guys that didn't include Roy Soler. Also, Teoscar Hernandez, eyes emoji on that one. Rhys Hoskins, we mentioned, and also Mitch Garver, another eyes emoji. So, Roy Soler, no qualifying offer. The Marlins did not take the risk in offering him upwards over $20 million. That to me is a very interesting decision, because if you'd have turned it down and then signed a multi-year deal somewhere, likely the Marlins would have seen a decent draft pick return, either a Comp B, Comp A pick. The Marlins decided the risk wasn't worth the pick. And that does this maybe point towards their payroll challenges at this point, that perhaps the Marlins may be looking to either shrink payroll or reallocate resources elsewhere? $20 million for Soler may be too high.
Absolutely, yeah. 20 mil, if he were to have taken it, would have been too high for the Marlins. You're looking at a player that had a 1.9 F4 last season, and by far his best year in the last couple of years, other than his one fantastic year. His average over the last 3 or 4 years is like 0.6 or something. There was a negative one in there. I think it's sensible for them not to offer it if they didn't want him to take it, which I presume they didn't. They just want to try and get that draft pick compensation. In the open market, what's the leg going to get? Like the predictions are 345. That means that if he took this contract at 20, he'd only then need to get a 225 to equal that and balance that out. So realistically, I think the team probably did the right thing. It's a shame that obviously the draft pick compensation would have been great, but I think it was too much of a risk. I think the chances of him taking it were probably sort of like 50-50, and that's not a chance that the Marlins really can or would be willing to afford.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for the Marlins here, they've entered a situation where there's too much dead money on the books already. And so I think that limits their ability to offer a $20 million one-year deal to Jorge Soler in case he takes it. Because with all the dead money and the need to replace various bits and pieces, like they have a limited amount of resource to do so with Avi Garcia's dead money, Sandy's dead money, the other bits and pieces with the opt-outs, etc. So, there's a lack of flexibility there, and they just have to make a hard call to work out how do we want to allocate our resources. But in effect, Peter Bendix straight in, and I don't know how closely he will have been to making these calls, but let's assume he has been. And the first two calls he's made, from what I can see anyway, is exercising the option on John Berti, $3.6 million, somewhere in that range anyway. Which feels like good value for someone that adds so much versatility, and then equally not offering a qualifying offer to Jorge Soler. So that means that the offseason is now officially open, official, in the, the Marlins now have the ability to start signing free agents. I think that started 25 minutes ago, if I've got my US timings correct. So I think free agency is now open, as Anton Deck would say. But anyway, this episode is now drawing to a close. Sean Barrett's like, what the hell are you on about? And everyone listening is like, what the hell are you on about? But anyway, it's going to draw it to a close. In summary here, guys, and there's a lot. They're like in 32 minutes worth of content here, we have covered tons. Berti is with the club. Soler definitely not. No draft pick coming. No qualifying offer. New president of baseball ops is in. Peter Bendix is in. What does that mean in terms of strategic change? Seismic. It's a huge change. The Rays model is looking to be followed by the Marlins, and it's the right model for a low-budget team to be following. When you look at the Rays, you consider all of the amount of postseason appearances they have had consecutively, including a World Series appearance. And you look at the Rays farm system. It's a top 5 farm system, even though the budget's tiny and the on-field product, whether it excites you is another thing, but it has been effective, and they win games, and they win a lot of games. The Marlins, yes, they've made it to the postseason one time. Can they sustain that success? Problem is the farm is bottom 5. That's Peter Bendix's brief now. Sustained success with a sexy farm as well. It's tough to do, but he can do it. Thanks for joining me on Locked On Marlins and the UK GOAT, Sean Barrett, on Monday's episode. This week is going to be action-packed. I know it. There's tons to get into. I want to talk about Trevor Bauer, but I didn't have time today. I want to talk about Trevor Bauer. Maybe Trevor Bauer won't quite fit the Peter Bendix profile, but nevertheless, we need to talk about him because the Marlins need some arms, and I think there's a reclamation project in there somewhere. But nevertheless, we'll be back tomorrow, likely digging into Jorge Soler and equally starting to look at some free agents. I also have my eyes on some non-tender candidates from other clubs. I think there could be some trade business to do for the Marlins, but at what cost? We'll dig into that as the week goes on. We'll see you soon.